Okay, now we're going to talk through printing a file. So we're going to talk about preparing to print a file, printing the file, and then selecting one section of a worksheet to print. So let's say that we wanted to print this workbook. And again, I've opened up, we had the Excel skills for HR database test file open. I've closed that out and I've reopened our original file, which is called Excel skills for HR database. So I've reopened that file, and let's say that we want to print this file as it is. Well, we can go to File and Print, and it shows us a preview here of what this file would look like if we were to print it. You can see that it's outlined in portrait mode, and if we scroll down, I'm just using the scroll on my mouse. If we scroll down, we can see the headings disappear, so we don't know what these columns mean. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns here on the first several sheets until we get about halfway through, and then it starts the other two columns. So the columns are split up, and so now we don't know what employee ID goes with these data and what do these data mean and all these kinds of things. So let's fix some of these issues that we have with printing, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So if we go to, if we're on the File tab or the Home tab here, if we go to Page Layout, we can fix a lot of the things that we just saw. And what I want to do first is I want to adjust our orientation. So right now I mentioned that it was in Portrait. I want to adjust that to Landscape. So I'm going to click here on Landscape because we couldn't see all of the columns. Now if we go back to File and Print, we can see that we have all of the titles up here, and all of the columns are available if we were to print. We still, though, don't know, as we scroll through, we still don't have those titles up at the top, so we want to fix that now as well. And you can see that our the number of pages that we have went down by half because we don't have to repeat these two columns now for each employee. The size, you can also select the size that you want here. We're going to leave it at letter because that's kind of the standard that we want to do. The print area we're going to talk about here in a minute. Page breaks. Background, if you wanted to add a background, you could. If you click on background, it brings you to kind of several different options. So you can insert a picture from a file, you can look at a Bing image search, or if you have a OneDrive, you can bring it in from there. But let's just search Bing real quick for human resources and see what we find. If we hit enter, it comes up with several different things. You are responsible for copyright, so be careful with that. But basically, if you click on the picture and say insert, it makes a big copy of that, so you can see kind of that puts it there in the background. I typically don't use backgrounds in Excel because they get to be a little bit distracting with all of the data that you're looking at, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that background. But if you ever should want to put a background in, that's how you would do it. So I'm going to say here delete. Print titles. Now this is important. So this brings up your page setup menu box or pop-up box, and we have several tabs across here. So you have our page. Again, this is kind of where you might want to change your portrait or landscape. You can get to it here as well. The scaling, so you can adjust to different sizes. This one is super important. Fit to 1 page wide by however many pages tall, and it will shrink your data to do that for you when you're printing. It will ask you your print quality and then your first page number as well. Your margins you can set here, so you can adjust your margins again just like any other Microsoft Office application. You can center it on the page as well. Your headers and footers, this is another way to get to your headers and footers. We showed you before how to do that using the different views of the worksheet, but here's another way that you can do that. I find it easier the other way, but if you wanted to do it, you can do it here. So you just click on custom header and you can select the different sections, and here are your buttons up here to insert those various different pieces of information. And then back to our sheet. So you can define your print area here as well. If you click on this arrow here, you can highlight kind of what you want to print, and then you would click this down arrow again, but we'll do that a different way here in a minute. But what I wanted to show you first of all is to rows to repeat at top. So in our worksheet we have the column headers here on the first row. We want to repeat those on each sheet so that if we do print out this workbook or worksheet, we can tell kind of what each of those columns mean. So we're going to click on this arrow here, and you'll see that the cursor turned into the black arrow because you're going to have to select an entire row. And so we're going to come over here and select row number 1. You can see we've selected that because it's now a dotted line across. So we're going to click the down arrow here. And we can select, if you want to repeat columns at the left, you can. So if you wanted to repeat the ID number, but we're going to fit that on the page anyway, so no worries there. If you wanted to print your grid lines, you can do it here, your black and white, and we'll go on from there. So we're going to hit OK. And then let's go to, again, File, and we're going to go to Print, and it's going to bring up our print preview, and this is our first page. And if we scroll down, again, I'm going to scroll down on my mouse, we can see that the ID numbers change. So this is ID number 76 to 112, and we get to 113 to 150, 151, etc., but we still have those column headers across the top, which is super important. And we'll see that it's a little bit off to the left. See how there's more space over here on the right than there is to the left. So let's say we want to correct that. If we go back to our page setup, we can go to our margins and say center on page horizontally and vertically and hit OK there. Go back to our file, print, and now it's centered on the page. So again, just different ways to clean things up before you print, and then actual printing. So when you do get your worksheet all sorted out in terms of what you would like to print, you would go then to File, Print, and then make sure, I always do a check here to make sure that it looks like what I'm expecting it should look like. And then once you do that, you would just hit Print. It's set to Adobe PDF, but you would select the printer here within the printer drop down. You can then go to Properties and set the properties there. The number of copies are here. You can also select the number of pages that you'd like to print. This is going to say, print active sheets. That's the default. Print your entire workbook. So if you have multiple worksheets within your workbook, you're going to be able to print all of them here. If you want to print a selection, there are several different ways to do that. So let's try a few different ways. So let's say we just want to print rows 1 through, let's say, 20. What I'm going to do is click and drag my mouse all the way down to row 20, which is our 19th employee. And I'm going to say print area up here on the page layout menu. I'm going to click on print area and set print area. What that's going to do is highlight that that's the only area that we're going to print. So if I go back to File and Print, we're going to see that that's the only area that's going to be printed. You can see that it's only page 1 of 1 because that's what we have highlighted. And again, it remains centered on the page. If we would have headers and footers up here, those would remain as well. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to say print area and clear print area. Let's say I want to print that same rows again, so I'm going to go to row 20, all of the data. I can do that a different way as well. If I go to File, Print, instead of Print Active Sheets, if I say Print Selection, it's then going to bring up that selection. So that's another way that we can do it. And again, if we had headers and footers, it would be the same thing here. So I'm going to say Print Active Sheets. Let's say we only wanted to print the first 112 employees. So that's on page 3. If we go to pages 1, I'm just going to type this in, 2, 3, and then we click out of here. It will print pages 1 through 3. So if we do entire workbook again, it's going to print the entire workbook, etc., etc. So we have lots of different ways that we can control printing, and lots of different ways that that you can manage your printing before you, or manage your document before you print it. And so I encourage you to kind of play around with it, and so that you get kind of what you're expecting. But I would say the most important thing here is how do you repeat the column headers up at the top, and then how do you set your print area so that you don't print the whole thing every time. I've seen a lot of people printing off, tens or hundreds of pieces of paper because they forgot to select the print area. Next thing they know, they have an entire ream of paper that it's a data set they didn't mean to print. So that's printing a file, how to prepare your document to print a file, and how to select one section of a worksheet to print.